Today, I and my eminent colleagues have the honor of being incorporated in our new status as professors at Stockholm University in this marvelous rite of passage. As a social anthropologist, I appreciate how this ritual bonds us to the community of our peers after years of laboring in that liminal space between one status and another, sometimes literally changing our place on the map. Neither here nor there. Now we are spectacularly here. Social anthropologists try to understand the internal logic of a society, how human beings order their lives and create meaning. What are people's norms and values, their patterns of behavior? How are these affected by or cause economic and political events? The object of my research for many years has been Turkey. In past research projects, I've asked questions like, how did Turkey's newly globalized economy affect urban migrant women in the 1980s? Or why did Islamist political parties become popular in the 1990s? What does it mean these days to be Muslim and to be Turkish? Have these changed? How and why? Anthropological research rests on extensive participant observation. For my study of migrant women, for instance, I spent 2 years in squatter areas around Istanbul. The benefit of delving so deeply into people's daily lives is that even though we have a project we've come to research, often we end up asking new questions that we hadn't thought to ask. Interviews and library research are also part of our methodological toolbox. As a field, social anthropology bridges social sciences and the humanities. Behind such attention to the details of human living is a desire to grasp the enormous human diversity in cultures and social relations. Societies around the world have developed remarkably different forms of kinship, political systems, religions, cosmological beliefs. And anthropology is also a comparative discipline. We try to see beyond the unique characteristics of any one society to develop generalizable models of human behavior that help us to explain values, practices, and social changes in other societies, and that help us to understand ourselves better. My own research has focused on understanding the role of local cultural norms, first in capitalist production, and then in political mobilizing. One particular set of values and practices appears central to both. Reciprocity refers to the non-market exchange of goods or labor. It comes with a hidden but powerful obligation to return the favor. There are many types of reciprocity relations, each with its own often unstated rules. In pre-capitalist societies that lacked formal economic and political institutions, norms about sharing and exchange practices allowed people to have an orderly life that ensured that everyone was taken care of and protected. I'll give you 2 examples of how models of cultural practice like reciprocity continue to play important roles in the present. In the 1980s, Turkey opened its economy to the world market. Squatter areas around the big cities became like factories without walls, as women were put to work in their homes, producing for the world market. They earned very little. One woman I interviewed worked about 70 hours a week using a knitting machine at home. And she asked me, "Why are you interested in me? I don't work. I'm only doing this to help my neighbors." By denying that she worked, she was emphasizing to the other women in the room that she was an iyi kadın, a good woman, that her labor was a contribution to the well-being of her family and by extension, her neighbors. In a sense, she was claiming that her labor was freely paid into what we might imagine as a social treasury. When a member in good standing in the community, an iyi kadın, needed something, she could expect assistance from the community. By exchanging obligations and debts in this open-ended way, people create long-lasting relationships where the ball is always in play. Otherwise, it's simply business, where labor is paid for and no long-term relations are created. Once a debt is paid, the account is closed, the ball drops, and no one has any further expectations of each other. Distributors in the squatter areas took advantage of these cultural definitions of women's work by using the language of family obligation to refer to their business dealings and to explain why they paid so little. In this new global capitalist economy, women's work for pay became an extension of their work for the family, in both of which labor was endlessly demanded and poorly compensated. But from the woman's point of view, presenting her work as that of a good woman was a smart investment in her long-term future support by the community. Smarter, perhaps, than risking her reputation by admitting she was working so that she could ask for a few more lira. High inflation would have quickly eaten away any short-term profit. In other words, the global capitalist market uses local cultural norms to lower production costs. At the level of global labor, these women were indeed exploited. But at the local level, their labor took part in an altogether different set of meanings that brought them social benefits. In the 1990s, I studied the rise of the Islamist movement in Turkey and discovered that the success of Islamist political parties was less due to religion than to their grassroots mobilizing. They engaged in a populist, neighborhood-based politics grounded in norms of reciprocity and mutual obligation that were expressed as neighborliness and legitimated by reference to Islam. Activists made sure their neighbors had help finding food and coal for the winter. They'd even find a wife for a person's son. Party activists were paying into that social treasury, building up the likelihood that their neighbors would help them at election time. And of course, they'd provide them a ride to the polls. In my more recent work, I've begun to examine the darker side of group norms. I'm asking why Turkish society seems to continually splinter into mutually hostile groups, leading to the kind of extreme polarization that we see in Turkey today. This is the sort of exploration that being a professor makes possible. And it is, of course, also what made us professors. By means of this very Swedish cultural ceremony, Stockholm University makes us welcome into a community that, in the best tradition of reciprocity, values our labor and encourages our contributions. Thank you.